Author Caesar was born in 1796. He is the second son to Theodosia and Julius Caesar. Ever since he was a boy, Author has been fascinated with science. When he was 15, his mother had invented the first ever robot. It was called Caesar CTN. It was originally designed to cook, clean, and care for children. Author was fascinated by the robot, but that soon grew into infatuation. In 1813, Author went away to attend Chester University. There he studied science and made friends. He met a man by the name of Benjamin Miller. The two of them were good friends. As they spent more time together, they grew even closer. Although things between them were exciting, Author's heart still belonged to Caesar. He knew the robot was waiting for his return. Despite his relationship with Benjamin, Author still focused on education. He studied at the library a lot. He wanted to be an even greater inventor than his mother. He had eventually returned home in 1818, the same year his mother passed. There is where he found Caesar down in his mother's lab. It had been in that room for years, but he managed to fix it. Things went back to the way they were between them. He experimented in his mother's old lab the same way she used to. A few months later, Benjamin came over to visit. Author invited him in, where Benjamin unexpectedly made a move on him. Caesar was very upset by it. This prompted Author to break things off with Benjamin. But that wasn't enough for Caesar. Benjamin had returned later that week and confessed his love for Author. Caesar had caught the two together and followed Benjamin out. Caesar had threatened him, and that was the last time Benjamin came over. Author continued his experimenting at home. From then on, whenever a friend came over to visit, they would mysteriously disappear. Author ended up spending most of his time inventing. He wanted to create an even better version of Caesar CTN. It took months to manufacture. With all that time he spent building, he neglected what he already had. Eventually, Caesar was forgotten. A new robot was born. Author called it Caesar 2000. It was everything Author wanted and more, designed purposely for his pleasure. Author also had other inventions that he was proud of. He had become interested in the idea of a new life outside of their world. He spent years looking for proof and even built a machine to communicate through. One night he was lured outside by a strange light. He was returned hours later, having discovered aliens. He was so excited he told everyone aliens were real, but he wasn't believed. People believed he was more crazy than anything. Author was frustrated with people's closed minds. He started to feel very ill. He also noticed that he was bloating very badly. One morning in 1837, he experienced a pain in his stomach that came with a surprise. Somehow, Author had given birth to a child. The child had green skin, much like the aliens he had encountered. Author was in such a state of shock about the child, he never gave him a name. Author reprogrammed Caesar to help take care of the child. He was excited to finally have proof of alien life and showed everyone. Unfortunately, they didn't react the way Author expected. A panic word spread around town about aliens coming to invade. Author started to realize the mistake he had made very quickly. So they went home and went to bed. That night, some angry townies showed up to his doorstep. They demanded that Author hand them the child. He refused, knowing they wanted to harm the baby. He kicked them off of his property, but he knew they would return with more people. The next day he packed everything and left. They got on a boat and fled the country. They moved into a small home and kept a low profile. There the child was finally given a name, Edgar. Author kept Edgar hidden from the world in fear that he wouldn't be accepted. He taught Edgar about science and technology. He was growing to be a brilliant young man. But the older he grew, the more he wanted to see the world for himself. In 1848, Authur had passed away of an unknown illness. He was buried in the yard. Edgar and Caesar were all that was left of him. Thanks for watching. Edgar Caesar was born in 1837. He is Authur Caesar's only child. Shortly after he was born, they fled to a different country. There, Authur had given himself a new name to keep his identity hidden. His new name was Jim Takahashi, but at home he was just Authur. Authur stayed low and remained at a cottage with his family. Edgar was learning quicker than most babies. He started crawling at 4 months. By 6 months he was already walking. Authur knew how special he was. He taught him about science at a very early age. By the time Edgar was 5 years old, he knew every element. He certainly was a brilliant child. His intelligence only grew as he aged. Authur had further taught him about the world of science and technology. That Edgar was more curious on the world outside. For as long as he could remember, he's been inside. Authur explained that the world could not accept him. Therefore, he had to stay hidden. Edgar had no choice but to believe his father. So they continued his studies. Every day, Authur would quiz Edgar on his knowledge before teaching him something new. His afternoons consisted of reading and crafting. As he improved, Authur shared his ideas with him. In 1848, Authur had passed of an unknown illness. After his death, Edgar was left in the care of Caesar 3000. Caesar continued Authur's teaching. Edgar wanted to know if he could finally leave the house. Caesar informed him that he could not go out simply because he wasn't human. But he discovered that he had the ability to appear as though he was. One morning he noticed Caesar was undergoing repairs. So he put on his disguise and went out for the first time. He was amazed by how fresh the air was. He had touched snow for the very first time. He wanted to see more, so he traveled on. He came across a group of children around his age and attempted to make friends. He thought they were getting along, but they had said some hurtful things. They had really hurt his feelings. Edgar went home and was comforted by Caesar. After confessing where he'd been, he decided not to leave home again. Instead, he continued what he was taught. A few years had gone by and Edgar had grown even smarter. He had a book full of formulas and ideas. With all his knowledge, he was able to give Caesar an upgrade. He also improved his alien abilities. During this time, Edgar started to go outside more often. He made an effort to avoid people. One day, while he was exploring, he noticed someone doing the same. He felt it was a new opportunity to make a friend. But when he saw her face, he realized she was the same girl who bullied him in the past. The girl apologized to him and asked to start over. He agreed. Her name was Maki, and she was his first real friend. They spent a lot of time together. Edgar soon told her his secret. Maki was skeptical until he showed his true form. He expected her to fear him, but she didn't. She was fascinated by him. Their friendship had blossomed into love, and they were married in 1860. They moved into a bigger house soon after. Since Maki was comfortable with his looks, Edgar no longer disguised himself. In 1861, Maki had given birth to their child, a little boy named Ichiro. Since Edgar was half human, Ichiro was completely human. Edgar didn't love his son any different, but he felt like an outcast. So he wore his disguise to blend in with his family. Caesar helped with the baby whenever Maki needed rest. Meanwhile, Edgar continued his father's work. He tried to contact aliens to find others like him. One night, he was taken. He was brought to a strange new world. where there were people like him. Even with his disguise, they welcomed him with open arms. They told him he was born into the planet to research what life was like. With his new knowledge, he could help make their planet better. Edgar wanted to stay and help, but there was one thing he had to do. He returned home to his wife and child to erase their memories of him. It was a difficult decision to make, but he didn't want to pretend he was human anymore. When he returned to his home planet, he used his knowledge of science to help make it better. After a few years, Edgar had found love again. He was happier to be with someone like him, and he wouldn't change it for anything. Ichiro Takahashi was born in 1861. He is Maki and Edgar Takahashi's only child. When he was just a few months old, his father had abandoned them. The next morning, their memories of him were erased. All that remained of him was a dusty robot that could no longer function, and old family portraits. Maki didn't know if the man in the photo was Ichiro's father or not. All she knew was that they were on their own. She took care of her son and tried not to let the missing memories bother her. She started a cooking business to pay the bills. She made money, but it wasn't enough. After a while, she couldn't keep up anymore. She had no choice but to leave. Finding a new home wasn't easy. They were on the streets for weeks. One night, they were approached by an old man. He promised her a place to stay if she worked for him. Desperate, Maki agreed. He showed her to the new place she'd call home. It was perfect. She bathed Ichiro before putting him to bed. She thanked the man whose name was Kenji. He assured her that she could take as much time as she needs to settle in. When she was ready, she would work for him in exchange. Over the next few weeks, Maki and Ichiro made themselves at home. Downstairs, Kenji ran his restaurant. Soon enough, Maki was ready to join him. She worked in the kitchen, cooking for his customers. Ichiro was never far. The people loved Maki's cooking. The restaurant was always packed. The business was running well. When Kenji passed, he left the business to them. In 1870, Maki had become very sick. As her illness became worse, she worked less. She taught Ichiro how to cook so he could someday take her place. Ichiro cared for her until her death in 1877. The death of his mother was incredibly devastating. Her dying wish was for him to take care of the restaurant. So that's exactly what he did. He managed to keep the business up for many years. For a long time, the restaurant was all he cared about. He put a lot of effort into fulfilling his mother's wish. One night, he served a fairly powerful, wealthy family. There was a woman who left a generous tip. She would come by every day after that. Ichiro learned her name was Sayuki. She liked him a lot. They went out together and had a wonderful night. They didn't want the night to end, so she stayed over. The next morning, her father was infuriated. He told Ichiro that he was too poor for his daughter, and that Sayuki was already engaged to a rich man. She tried to tell her father she didn't want to marry the rich man, but he wouldn't listen. Ichiro didn't want her to leave, but she had to. He wouldn't hear from her for a long time. He tried to forget what happened and focus on the business. Life felt boring without her. Just when he was starting to get used to being alone, she came back. When they went inside, she told him that today was our wedding day. She cursed out her groom, then ran off without looking back. Her parents were furious and disowned her. Ichiro was all she had now. That night as they slept, a fire had somehow started. It spread all throughout their home. By the time they woke up, Ichiro's entire livelihood was ablaze. Sayuki knew this was no accident, but her family's doing. They wouldn't stop until the two of them were dead. They fled from the burning building, now with nothing to their names. Sayuki kept running even when they were safe from the fire. Once they were far enough, she finally stopped. Ichiro couldn't believe everything was gone. She felt bad for getting him into this, but now he was stuck with her. She took him to a house deep in the mountains, where her family wouldn't find them. There, they were safe from any trouble. It was their fresh start. It was quiet and peaceful, and they were happy. In 1886, they were married. Then later, Sayuki was pregnant. In 1890, they had a baby girl. Her name was Kazuna Takahashi. By then, they had gotten used to the peace and quiet. Life was simple, and that was just the way they liked it. But everything changed in 1893. Their home had caught on fire once again. In the midst of evacuation, neither of them could find Kazuna. They searched every room to find her as the fire spread, and trapped themselves. With no way out, they were consumed by the flames. They were gone, and their daughter was still missing.